Okay, my name is Ron Carrico. I'm with the San Diego Air and Space Museum, and today is, oh wow, it's Valentine's Day, February 14th, 2018, and Hank Goetz, and he is going to tell us about his career in the Air Force. And so let's start off with where were you born?
I was born in a little town on Long Island called Elmont, and Elmont's the town where the Belmont racetrack's at.
And what year were you born?
1936, at home on the kitchen table.
Cool. What did your parents do?
My dad was most his adult life he worked for Grumman as an assembler. He just put things together. Neither one of my. I was raised right there in Elmont. Grew up, went to a high school. There was a Central High, and I got if from a location point of view, if you can picture Kennedy on one corner, LaGuardia on another, and Mitchell Field on the third, forming a triangle. We were sort of living in the middle of that. So I saw airplanes all the time, and ever since I was about 6 years old, I think I wanted to fly.
Oh, really? That early, huh?
Yeah.
Wow.
And I had an opportunity when I was in high school. They had a club called the Civil Air Patrol, and I joined it and took some classes and got involved there. Got my first airplane ride.
What was that?
You know, I don't remember what kind of airplane it was, but it was something similar to just a Piper Cub. And it was at a dirt strip on Long Island called Zons Airport. It's not there anymore. And little did I know from that first airplane ride at Zons, it was a grass of dirt, I can't remember. There was a highway right alongside of it. I could throw a rock across the highway and hit Republic aircraft.
So now
and by the way, the reason I brought it up is because little did I know on that first airplane ride that within 10 years, I was picking up brand new airplanes at the Republic factory, coming right off the assembly line, F-105 Thunder Chiefs, and I picked up one that had an hour and 10 minutes on it.
Oh, wow.
That was it. I actually went to Rutgers University on pretty much a full boat lacrosse, and chose that particular school because it had Air Force ROTC, and I could see a light at the end of the tunnel to get into flying. And graduated Rutgers in 1958, went straight into the Air Force and to pilot training.
So you actually entered the Air Force as a second lieutenant then?
Yes,
okay.
Yes. Went to Malden, Missouri, which was a primary training field. It had T-34s, T-28s, and then went down to Laredo.
Now, compare the T-34. What's the difference between that and the T-28?
T-34 is probably the easiest airplane to fly you could get your hands on. And everybody remembers it because it was fully aerobatic, and you could do anything, and it was very forgiving. So, you know, it's hard to get into trouble in it. And we got about 35 hours in that, and then went to the T-28, which at the time I thought was the biggest airplane I'd ever seen. And it was more like a World War II fighter. Big, noisy, huge engine out front. I can't remember what kind of engine it had, but...
it's about 850 horsepower, as I recall.
Yeah,
something like a lot.
Red Line was in the 300s, 323, something like that.
It's a World War II fighder.
Yeah,
Sure.
And you got about 125 hours in that.
Oh, wow, that's a lot.
And, well, yeah, mainly because they took you through all the stages of flying, right up through formation, aerobatics, you know, some instruments, and so forth. And after that, I went to Laredo, Texas for T-33s. And
so now, okay, so you go from a T-28, a big radial, fully aerobatic. Now you're going to do a jet. What was it like to go from one to the other?
For me, it was pretty easy. Usually, mentally, you have to think faster. You have to be ahead of the airplane all the time. So that was probably running to keep up with it for the first few hours. And after a while, it was very easy. I'm really one of the lucky ones. I found flying to be the easiest thing I've ever done in my life. And it's just so much fun. I stayed with it for over 40 years.
So what would be a landing speed of a T-28?
Oh, I'm thinking 120, 125.
You mean down on final, you mean?
Yeah.
And then a T-bird, what was it? T-bird, final approach speed.
Oh, I'm sorry, you said T-28.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, T-28, yeah, you know, that's it's over 60 years ago. So, no, not quite 60 years ago, but I really don't know. Maybe in the 90s.
Okay, and then but then the T-33, then you'd be about 120 on final, probably adjust for fuel a little bit.
120 to 125.
And touchdown 80, 90, 100, something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
Okay.
Straight wing, a lot of flaps.
Did the T-birds have ship tanks at that point?
Yes, they did.
So how long could you fly them?
My cross country, I went from Laredo, I think we went nonstop to Las Vegas, Nellis.
Oh wow. Wow. So now obviously you did well because you got a fighter assignment.
I did. I graduated at the top of my class and got a fighter assignment out of Laredo when I got my wings. Went straight to Luke Air Force Base in Phoenix. Went through basic gunnery there. Nothing special. A couple of odds and ends things happened to me.
Well, okay, so with the F-100, you had 20 millimeter cannons.
420s.
420s, and then you also had the typical practice bomb with probably 6 bombs in it.
Probably, yeah.
And so when you'd go to the range and you'd go to Gila Bend, right? And so then you would, what would you use those 6 bombs for typically on a practice mission?
Okay, we could use them for skip bomb, which is simulated napalm drop.
Mm-hmm.
So that was 50 feet over a box on the ground. You had to plunk a couple of bombs in there to qualify. In those days, they were just getting into the nuclear business with the F-100. Prior to that, prior to my going through Luke and Nellis, it was primarily a day fighter, and the units over in, for instance, in Europe were day fighter.
When you say fighter, you mean air to air?
Air to air. With the capabilities
Doesn't seem like it doesn't sound like
air
very
to ground. It had fully air to ground capabilities. But to give you an idea, when they were checking us out for initial nuclear delivery, it was going to be VFR day only, because we had no radar or anything to work with. And just to, as a practice maneuver for VFR nuclear delivery, you'd climb up to 32,000 feet, roll over on the target in a 70-degree dive angle, pickle at 18 with the throttle way back, and pull out by 10, and then burn a climb back up to 32 and do that. That's what we did with those little practice bombs.
Wow, I never heard of that before.
And then you had to get certain scores to qualify. But this was, they were considering the airplane for nuclear delivery, but its only capability was daytime VFR. The 105 Thunder Chief was even better than that. Theoretically, you didn't use all the systems all the time, but you could run it at, say, 500 feet on the autopilot, track the target down with your radar scope, have a cursor out there, maybe 30,000 foot cursor. You line it up. Once the cursor and the range crossed, you hit a pickle button, and you got a yellow light. The computer computed the release angle, your speed and everything else. We had air data computer in it. When the green light came on, if it was on the autopilot, it would pull 4G over the top, bomb bay doors would open, throw the bomb out, come over the top, roll you out, and take you back to wherever you wanted to go. And it was all done automatically on the autopilot.
Wow.
And of course we did it manually also, practice it manually in case the autopilot wasn't working. 105 had a number of different types of deliveries. You could go across the target and do a 4G pull, throw the bomb straight up,
Right.
and then come down. You could put it on toss bomb, a loft,
Sure.
and pull up and then calculated an angle and release the bomb, and
Right.
you threw it and went this way.
But
You got to remember, I left the Air Force in 1964,
yeah,
so there's a lot of things happened after that.
because I got in 65, so. So I never heard of that delivery system. I've always heard about the loft delivery, and I was surprised. A friend of mine flew F-4s in Japan, and they did the over-the-shoulder in Japan. We didn't do it in Europe. Who knows why?
Yeah.
I mean,
We did over the shoulder and loft.
Yeah, well, it both seems like a good idea to be going back the other way. But we had, I mean, maybe you never dealt with this. Did you actually ever fly in Europe then?
Flying
Oh,
Europe?
you flew in Bitburg, sure, of course you did.
Well, I flew F-100s out of Ramstein.
No, Ramstein.
And then 105s out of Bitburg.
But did you fly there? You had to fly when they had the buffer zone, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and what was, because I remember distinctly what our recovery procedure was supposed to be if we had dropped a nuclear bomb. Do you happen to remember what the recovery was for the?
Yeah, I do.
What was it?
We didn't have one. We flew one-way missions. And theoretically, you were supposed to go in and hit the target, and then on a map they'd say, this is a safe area. Go over here, and hopefully there'll be some people might want to help you if you bail out here. I always figured that was somebody else's target. And the reason that we flew one-way missions is because we were close enough to the East German border that we were supposed to get off the ground 15 minutes of when they blew the siren. And I remember talking to one of my maintenance guys, and he says, boy, I really feel sorry for you guys sitting one-way nuclear missions. I said, you know why they're one-way? And he said, no. I said, it's because you guys aren't going to be here. You'll be dead before I will, because I won't die until I get to the target. You're gonna be probably taken out right after I take off. So, you know, we were just close enough to not even plan fuel to come back.
Well, see, I flew out of Hahn. That's where I flew.
Oh, did you?
Which was just up the street.
Sure.
And our missions, we were always supposed to, figure on coming back. And I said, come on, you won't be here.
No.
I mean, Hahn, Bitburg, and Spangdahlem are just a straight line. One airplane can get all three of them. But the instructions to come back were to, turn around, come back, go to your base, fly at 300 knots to 10,000 feet, squawking emergency. Oh yeah, that'll work.
Yeah.
And there
Well,
was,
they didn't bother to have us return fuel, just enough to get out of the
well, our
target.
targets were, ours, we could have done it. I don't think, because our targets were in Czechoslovakia and East Germany, places like that. And they were like road intersections and airports and that kind of stuff.
Ours were more installations, Russian MiG fields and battalions.
Well, I think that was
of
part of
Army.
it. But I figured we had a big ORI one time, and we were supposed to plan our routes in. And so we had the whole map and where all the explosions were and a target number. And you could tell we were number 4 and 5 to the target sometimes. And,
Yeah, they neglect to tell you that, don't they?
and it was like, are you kidding me? You'd never be able to get to the target without getting blown up.
All right.
And we had an eye patch. Do you guys have an eye patch?
You know, the eye patch came in a little later.
That was really funny.
Yeah. To give you an idea, Cuban Missile Crisis. The 105 had a lot of capabilities. Cuban Missile Crisis, they took my squadron at Bitburg, and we downloaded our nukes, and they put sidewinders on, and of course we always flew with hot guns, and put us on 5-minute Zulu alert at the end of the runway. They were concerned that our blockade on Cuba would result in them blockading or harassing the 3 quarters that went in and out of Berlin at the time.
Oh yeah, well, that makes sense.
And so if their MiG started harassing our airplanes, I kept asking for instructions. What do I do when I take off? Can I shoot any MiG? And they never had an answer. They just wanted us available and ready.
It's interesting. I forgot that term, Zulu alert. You guys, the nuke alert was Victor alert,
Victor,
right?
yeah. And Zulu, Victor was 15 minutes. Zulu was 5.
Yeah, we had a Zulu. We had F-102s on the base that were on the Zulu, and a couple of times we actually set some Zulu alert with the F-4.
All the fighter bases all over Europe had one F-102 intercept squadron on it.
Oh yeah.
And this is a really funny story. We were sitting nuke alert at Bitburg, and of course we were supposed to get off the ground in 15 minutes. So a couple of our smarter guys said, you know, we've never done it. So we don't really know if we can get off in 15 minutes. So they said, they towed 2 birds with no nuclear weapons on it down to the alert pad, and then blew the siren. Pilots ran out, jumped in the airplane, they opened the gates, and the pilots took off. The F-102 intercept squadron sits right next to the Zulu, the nuclear alert area. And they're watching F-105s coming out of the nuclear alert area, the gates opening up and taking off And these guys are going crazy because they thought World War III's on and nobody's telling us anything.
Yeah. Well, so let's talk about the F-100. So you check out the F-100, and the class you graduated from pilot training was
60C.
60C. So then you spent 6 months at Luke or so.
Probably around 5-6 months at Luke, and then another 3 months or 4 months at Nellis. And in between those two,
And why was Nellis different than Luke?
Nellis was the finishing touches. It was sort of like Luke was basic airplane flying and gunnery, and when you got to Nellis, then you got the air refueling, a little bit more sophistication in the airplane. It's kind of like pre-fighter weapons school.
Okay.
So the finishing touches before they sent you out to your first squadron to go to work.
Was it?
That's a good segue to this story. You asked me if I ever got near a saber dance. At Luke, before we started flying the airplane, it's the first thing they did is show us.
Okay, let's talk about. All right. You got to explain what a saber dance is.
A saber dance. It's just a nickname.
Well, okay. Well, let's be more specific. An F-100 is actually known as a North American
Super saber.
Super Saber, and there was a situation.
Okay, a situation where this particular pilot was newly checked out in the airplane, and his job was to go pick up brand new ones from North American and take them over to George Air Force Base. And he was coming into George when Tower or Mobile spotted the fact that his nose wheel, they hadn't put the pin in it.
Ooh.
So his nose wheel was cocked. So he wasn't gonna, they were afraid, it might collapse or something would go wrong. So they called around, found out that they had up at Edwards, they could foam the runways. So he went up to Edwards, they foamed the runway, and he came in and he was trying to hit the foam and put it on as slow as possible. Now, the model that he flew, the F-100A and the C model, I spent most of my career in the C model, most of my time in the F-100. No flaps, no trailing edge flaps. They all had mechanical slats on the leading edge of the wing, but no trailing edge flaps on the A and the C. The D and the F, which the F being a two-seater, had flaps. So literally you flew it on and you flew it off. And minimum speed on final was about 185. So as you're coming in, as you get slower and slower, the angle of attack keeps coming up. You finally reach a point where you don't have enough thrust to maintain that speed. And as you get slower and slower, if a wing dips, you're going to have more lift on one wing than the other. So if the wing dips, you'll get yaw, because you're getting more lift coming off one wing. The only way to get out of that is with rudder. If you use aileron, it gets worse and goes over. And in the beginning of the Super Saber, F-100 Super Saber time, it killed a lot of pilots because turning base to final, you tighten up your turn because you're overshooting a little bit and you're getting slower and the angle of attack's getting higher. If you don't use rudder to solve that problem, you're going to be in pretty bad shape.
Adverse yaw is the term.
Adverse yaw. So when you try and take the aileron, take the turn out, it actually goes over,
right,
and puts you on the back, and it was really bad for a long time. Now the nickname, only because it was so vivid, they called it the saber dance. That pilot up at Edwards got behind the power curve, and then it started going back and forth because he's ruddering it and he's aileroning it, and the thing was like this until finally he lost control and it went in and he blew up and killed him. But they showed that movie to us before we ever went out to the first airplane. They wanted to make an impression, and they did.
Yeah.
They did. You learn real quick not to use aileron when you're low and slow.
That's the first time I ever heard the whole story. I didn't know about I just remember seeing pictures of it. The F-4 had a real bad adverse yaw problem, and when I first started flying it, they said this is just like a T-38, feet on the floor, no rudders required. And they lost a bunch of guys, and then finally it was.
I think it's specific to almost all swept wing airplanes. If you get low and slow, and you start to get a wing walk, then you're going to have more lift on one wing for a while, and then it's.
Well, the F4 had an aileron on top of the wing, very small, but on the other wing, it had the one that would go down. Was barn doors, really huge. So you get a hell of a lot more drag.
Oh.
It's,
Yeah.
I don't know. And after they figured it out, as soon as you got anywhere near high angle of attack, just when I was in the back seat most of the time, and I would just sit there, I'd grab all the radar like that. Guy in front seat couldn't move the thing back, get black and blue here. So anyway, let's go ahead. So
yeah.
So F-100, you get checked out, and your next assignment was
Ramstein, Germany. I went to Ramstein. We were a detached squadron from Bitburg.
And the squadron name was, or unit was?
We were a Tiger Squadron, 53rd TAC Fighter Squadron, and
what wing?
36 Tactical Fighter Wing at Bitburg.
Right.
So we were detached, and so I was flying F-100Cs, and I was only there for about 7 months, 7 months.
What months?
I think I arrived there around October, November 1960, and then by the following summer, I was in F-105 school at Nellis.
So you got to fly through the worst weather in the world.
Yes.
It sucked, didn't it?
I tell you what, I went up to my flight commander within a month of being there, and I'd been recovering all the time by myself in this lousy, really crappy weather. And I said, Brownie, when's a guy get to be a flight lead around here? And he looked at me and he smiled and he patted me on the head, because he was a big tall guy. He patted me on the head and he said, Hank, if you're alive in the spring, I'll make you one. I mean, it was just, if you make it through a winter over there, you're seasoned.
So did you guys fly single ship approaches, or did you fly formation landings?
Mostly single ship, but there were many occasions I did formation landings. Lost my AC generator one time. The only thing I had was a battery, so I had a radio. So since I had nothing to land with, he took me down on his wing.
We did
flying over there in Europe, and in those years, the winters were pretty severe.
Yeah.
And
well, I was here in '66 through '68. Yeah.
You go over there now and to Germany in the middle of summer, you could get 80s and 90 degrees.
Yeah.
Back then, I can remember one summer where the joke was that summer came in on Wednesday and left on Saturday because we wore sweaters the whole summer.
Yeah.
So the weather, the climate's changed a bit over the years.
It was rotten when I was there. I remember in '68 over spring vacation it was nice, but then the rest of the time was cold and rainy and it was just lousy. I lived on the Mosel River.
Did you?
So that was pretty. That's where I met my wife. So she was a school teacher. I'm sure you were over there about the same time when they had American school teachers. And
oh yeah. I met my wife at Bitburg.
Oh, there you go.
And she's not a German. She was an Australian. She was with a bunch of Australians traveling around Europe, and that's how I stumbled onto her.
And here's a handsome fighter pilot. Oh yeah, an American at that.
Well, we dated on and off for about a year and a half.
Yeah.
And
so anyway, so now compare flying wise, an F-100 to an F-105. And let's say for F-100, now, well, you flew them clean a little bit, but most of the time you flew them with 2 tanks on, 300-gallon tanks, as I recall.
275s when I was flying, but they upped them a little bit later on.
And you probably went down to wheelless.
A number of times, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. My whole 3 years over there, we were down there probably twice a year for all the gunnery and air-to-air and everything.
What was the name of the range?
El Watia.
There you go.
El Watia.
Yeah.
By the way, do you remember Wheels had one runway?
Yeah.
I was coming back from the range down there one day, and I'm the last one back from the range, and I look down, and there's a light twin, collapsed the gear and has the runway closed. And so I called ops, and I said, hey, how long before you get that airplane off there? He said, oh, probably, they tell us about 40 minutes. I said, well, I've got 15 minutes of fuel. What are my options? Anyway, the options that turned out to be there was Idris was a field down south of Tripoli,
That's the name I just remember, yeah.
emergency field.
Right.
And then there was this long silence, and our boss came back and said, or you can have the taxiway. I landed 105 on that taxiway, and if you remember, they were very narrow. If you didn't keep your nose wheel on the center line, you could have your wheels in the dirt. And I'll tell you, that was the smallest, scariest runway I've ever landed on, because it looked like you had to land on this strip, and there's no barriers at the end.
It was a 13,000-foot runway, though, as I recall.
Yeah, so it's a long taxiway.
Yeah, oh yeah.
But the point is, if I'd ever lost hydraulics or something, burner,
Yeah, okay.
you could get through you could do it.
And dive a little bit and get transonic area.
Yeah, you didn't do it much because it took so much fuel, and then you had the wing tanks, you're dragging things.
Yeah,
You almost never flew clean.
does anybody ever fly supersonic? I mean, realistically. I mean, if you're doing dogfighting, you're going to break the sound barrier, but you're not going to do it as a typical...
There's no reason to do it. The 105 was more critical. The 105 was so clean, if you dropped the nose and didn't pull the power back, you'd probably go through the mog.
Really?
Yeah, it was that clean. On my third flight in the 105, I took it up 35,000. They gave us a quarter, put on autopilot, hugged in the burner, clean airplane, and watched the needle go to 2.
Wow.
I mean, it could do it. It loved to go fast. And when I flew it, there was no max airspeed on the airplane. There are friends of mine that talked about coming off targets over in Vietnam, hitting 830 indicated.
Well, I know there was typical to about Mach 1.2 on the deck. Because that's how you got away from the bad guys.
Yeah.
Just put it in burner and roll. I don't know.
It loved to go fast. Matter of fact, the speed, my whole time flying it over in Europe, the speed schedule on takeoff, gear up, flaps up, accelerate to 500, hold 500 to 0.9, 0.9 to wherever you want to go. When it's time to come back, 0.9, 500, land.
So you flew low levels.
Low levels.
Because for Victor Alert, that's what Victor Alert is dropping nuclear bombs. So
Right.
you got to get down to low level to get in. Do you remember the airspeed and the altitudes you flew them at?
Yes. Typically for practice it's 500 feet, and we used 480 indicated, because what's that, 8 miles
Yeah. Right.
8 miles a minute.
Yeah.
And it was easy to do charts that way, but that was a practice thing.
Yeah.
But 480 is a mile speed for the 105. It really likes to go 550, 600. You could do 600 on a run and real easy, never even go burner.
So then you from the IP to the target 600.
Yeah.
Now the F4 was 420 and then 540, and when you would accelerate, it would unbelievable acceleration from 420 to 540, and you'd always overshoot it. It's just those things have so much horsepower. How much thrust does a F-105 have?
The F-105 had 26,000 pounds.
Oh wow!
And that's with burner. It's grossed out at 52,000.
Yeah, I think the F4 was lighter than that, but I think it weighed 29,000 dry.
Well, this is full 52,000 fully loaded.
I remember the first time I ever saw one up close. It was on the flight line at Del Rio, Texas. I went to Laughlin, and we were flying T-37s, and me and my roommate walked out one Sunday morning to look at these things. Good God. It was just huge,
It's amazing. Airplanes, if you've never been to one before and you go you're upgrading to a bigger one, they always look huge.
Yeah.
I retired from TWA flying 747s.
Well, that's about as big as
And after a while, it was just another airplane. At the first time you approach it, it's gigantic.
Yeah.
But after you get used to things, it's just another airplane.
Yeah. Well, like I say, basically, it's all what's between your eyes and your hands. That's pretty all you're seeing. You don't think about the mass in back of you so much.
Matter of fact, the commercial jets, you can't even see the wingtips. You don't even know where they are. You have to judge from.
A friend of mine flies 737s with Southwest, and he said the first time he saw the wings up like that, he'd taken off and he was cleaning things up. And he looked like, Jesus, where'd that come from? He said, surprised the heck out of him. He didn't know about it. Okay, so now the difference. So now, okay, you upgrade. Where'd you upgrade? McConnell to 105.
No, I went to Ramstein, flew the F-100 for about
Right.
7 months. Then we had the oldest F-100s in the inventory, the C models, no trailing edge flaps. So we were the first ones to get the F-105D, the all-weather model.
Right.
So 8 months later, I'm back in Nellis checking out in the F-105.
Well, they're not.
So I went through the 105 school, then back to Ramstein, and at that point they moved the squadron. We were detached squadron. They moved the squadron from Ramstein up to Bitburg. Logistics and parts and all that stuff. And then that's why I spent 1 year at Ramstein, 2 years at Bitburg.
So you got to Bitburg in like 63,
61.
61.
61, I left Bitburg in 63.
Yeah, it's where they had the good deals on stereo equipment.
Hi-Fi.
Hi-fi, right? Hi-fi.
Funny story. Inbound comes a DC-3 with a 2-star on it, and the base thought it was an ORI, and they were jumping through hoops, and the DC-3, the Goody Bird, lands, taxi down, pulls up outside of the hi-fi shop. He gets out, buys some hi-fi stuff, and leaves.
Were you excited about going to 105? Or?
Oh yes, absolutely. You can. I'm one of those guys. That's all I ever wanted to do is fly airplanes. And when they give you the world's fastest airplane that goes Mach 2, I thought I died gun heaven. And we had single seat.
Yeah.
So the first time you fly it, you're all by yourself. Thinking about the difference between the 100 and the F-105. The 100 was sort of like they give you a small old sports car with stick shift, and the 105 is like they give you a Cadillac with automatic.
Wow.
It was a comfortable cockpit. Everything was smooth about the airplane. It was honest, and it was very stable. You could be going along at 600 knots on somebody's wing, and you just sit there just as if nothing was happening. Excuse me. That squadron that I was in over in Germany, hindsight, I didn't realize that at the time, but it was one of the choice assignments in the Air Force, mainly because it was at Ramstein.
It was a
Right on the Autobahn, the big PX, it had everything, you could go everywhere. In my squadron, and I walked in and I'm a second lieutenant. In my squadron, we had 3 guys who had just come off the Thunderbirds, 2 test pilots out of Edwards.
Oh, wow.
And before I left Bitburg, to give you an idea how people worked their way to go over there and get in this unit, the guy that came into my squadron just as I left was a guy named Jim Kessler. You'll know him after I mention this. Nobody else in the military Air Force has ever gotten 3 Air Force crosses.
Oh.
3 of them. And he ended up as a POW.
Oh, yeah.
After I left that, but he came into that squadron. That was the kind of quality of the people that were coming in. So as a young buck, I flew with Eagles, not knowing. I didn't know it. I just thought, man, they're just
There's guys, yeah.
Yeah, but learned a lot.
Okay, the 105 was a Cadillac. Now you flew for 3 years out of Ramstein, so then you just retired out of Ramstein then?
No, 1 year out of Ramstein, 2 years out of Bitburg.
Yeah, okay.
Then I was assigned to Nellis as an IP in an F-105.
Okay.
So I spent a year there.
So you trained a lot of the guys that got shot down.
I know a lot of them. Matter of fact, most of the books I read about Vietnam, I pick up names throughout the book.
Well, they've lost 335.
So I spent a year.
I think 295 in combat.
Spent a year at Ramstein. I wanted out for a number of reasons. I didn't know anything about Vietnam. I resigned right at the Gulf of Tonkin. So you see, not much was going on before the Gulf.
So the Gulf of Tonkin was 64, late 64?
About late August 64.
Okay.
And that kind of started the whole thing. Well, by that time I was on my way out of the Air Force. So what I did was I resigned in the autumn of 64. On my way to the East Coast, I thought I was going to go to law school. Or, that in my mind I wanted to do nothing for 30 or 60 days and then plan my career. And I thought I might go to law school. And on my way to the East Coast, I stopped for gas in Kansas City. And as I'm getting gas, I look up and there's a billboard that says TWA. So I asked the gas station guy, I said, TWA big in this town? He said, you kidding? This is their headquarters. Pick up the phone, and 34 years later I retired from TWA as a 747 captain. So sheer luck, being in the right place at the right time. And it was as simple as that.
So TWA became what? TWA became...
TWA finally went under after a couple of corporate raiders just fleeced it of all its assets.
Right.
And it was a deal made through the government that TWA went bankrupt at midnight on Saturday night, and at 1 in the morning American Airlines bought it. So TWA was merged into American Airlines, and American is the surviving company. For instance, I retired from TWA before it went down, but I have a retirement pass on American. So I went with TWA. They assigned me to Kennedy Airport, New York. That was going to be my base. And I grew up in the 50s where all I ever wanted to do is go in the Air Force and fly F-86s, the Sabre.
Right.
Because I grew up with John Wayne, you know, king of the Yalu, shooting down MiGs.
Sure.
And I missed the airplane because by the time I got my wings, they said, oh, there are no more F-86 assignments. You got to go to the Super Sabre now. So I get to New York and I hear somebody talking, and apparently McGuire had F-86s. So I called up for an interview. And they said, yeah, come on down. Didn't ask me any questions. They says, yeah, come on down. So I went down there for an interview, and I walk in with my Form 5, and the guy says, what's your credentials? And I explained to him what I'd been doing. And he got a smile on his face, and I thought, oh, this is going well. And finally he went like this, took me over to the window, pulled the curtain back, and there was 20 F-105Bs parked out on a ramp. They'd just gotten them a few weeks before. 2 guys in the squadron were checked out. High man had 25 hours, and I was an ex-IP out of Nellis with 3 years in the airplane.
Oh, man.
And he says, I think we can use you. So for the next year, while I was flying with TWA, they gave me an unlimited active duty, and I just checked out the whole squadron.
It made up for the lousy pay on the TWA, right?
Oh, yeah, it really came. I was on $500 a month.
Yeah. So how long did it take you to get, I would say you probably started off in 707, right?
707, I was a flight engineer. Started out as a flight engineer.
Right.
And so they had a bunch of flight engineers in New York, so I hardly ever flew with TWA. I was just one of the reserves. So I put in almost full time down at the Guard at McGuire. And then about a year later, TWA asked me to come to Kansas City to a training center to be an instructor, a flight engineer instructor, and a check engineer. And I took the job for a number of reasons, but that's when I gave up my military flying for good.
So it would be 66 or so?
January '66. I went to Kansas City. I was a check engineer on 707s for maybe...
But how do you want to, I mean, I can't believe you'd give up flying a 105 to...
Well, by that time I'd flown it for 4 years.
Yeah.
I'm not saying the thrill was gone, I'm just saying that I was looking ahead to my future. And I just gotten married, and my first baby was on the way. And I was thinking, maybe there's something here that if they want me,
And it is dangerous after all.
that never bothered me. I was typical. I used to say that I was just what the Air Force wanted. I was young, stupid, and invincible. You know, and that give me 100 of those guys who will go to war.
Well, like Anch was saying last week, not me. I can't believe this is happening. You know.
And I had an interesting thing happen to me. While at TWA, I was in a training center. Within TWA, we had a lot of professional flight engineers from the Constellations and all the airplanes. Well, when the FEIA, Flight Engineer Union, and ALPA, the pilot union, merged, they allowed the flight engineers who were young, 45 years old or younger, to check out as a co-pilot if they had the licenses.
Right.
So because they didn't have a lot of time, they took all the domestic co-pilot slots. So my first co-pilot slot that I was eligible to get was international co-pilot on 707. So I had to go and get an ATR, a rating on a 707. My background, 0 co-pilot time in my life, 0 multi-engine time. And so I was going to go get a rating. And my boss at the training center had been talking about an experimental program. It was the forerunner of the simulator rating, where you did everything in the simulator. Well, back then the simulators were very primitive. So much so, if you can imagine, they were all run by IBM cards. And the visual wasn't all that good. So he asked me to volunteer for an experiment. And he says, if it doesn't work out, we'll let you go back. We'll just act like it never happened, just put you back through the regular program. And the idea was, give me as much simulator as I needed and as little airplane time. So I was very familiar with the simulator because I was a check engineer in there. And one of the reasons they asked me is because they knew I wouldn't have any trouble with the airplane mechanics and how it was all put together. In other words, the only thing they had to worry about me was the flying. He put me up for a rating ride on a 707 at 5.5 hours airplane time. And I passed. And the FAA and my instructor were sort of like asshole buddies, but they were always in sort of a pissing contest. And so my instructor says, well, write him out a ticket. And the FAA guy says, I can't do that. I said, why not? He says, well, your manual, your policy manual calls for a minimum of 8 hours and he doesn't have it. Do you know they made us go out and waste a couple hours shooting landings, come back, and I had to do the whole rating ride all over again. And
So that's what you had in your,
yeah,
that's that black thing that I saw.
yeah, that's the old license. I've got the new one in my pocket.
Yeah, okay.
But
Well, I'd never seen one before, so.
well, the fact that I did so well, they brought me back in a little later. Well, we bought 2 Lockheed Jetstars, and we boogered the system a little bit to make them airborne simulators. And this was in the mid-60s. We hired a whole bunch of commercial instrument ticket 200-hour Cessna pilots because the war was going on, Vietnam War. They weren't letting the pilots out, and all the airlines were hiring. So the pilot pool just dried up, like it is today. Just dried up. So now we have a bunch of light airplane pilots with commercial instrument sitting in the flight engineer seat, and after a couple of years, now they've got a co-pilot's bid. And now they're going to go from Cessna 150, or whatever they were flying, to the right seat on a 707. The gap is huge. So if these guys could get through the simulator, and most of them did, then I would get them, and the company brought me in, and I flew these Lockheed Jetstars. I would give them 6 hours, and we just go out and bring them from light airplane to the jet world. And it was a fun job. I had a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. The FAA didn't really care about it because it was, quote, an experiment. So they never even come out and look at me. And I just had a lot of fun. And matter of fact, my briefing to these guys was, this is the only flying program in your entire life that you cannot fail. There's no pass or fail. We're going to try and learn as much as we can in 6 hours about jet age, flying jets, and all the different maneuvers that they're going to have to do in the big airplane. But the idea was to take a 707 out of service, to use it for practice is very expensive. We're losing money here, and it's costing us money here. So that's why we bought the 2 Lockheed Jetstars, to use them as the transition from one to the other. Like, once you fly a jet.
But then they have, the stories of guys going from transport type airplanes to jet fighters. Apparently it doesn't work out that well.
No, it doesn't.
And they found that out in World War II, big time, whenever they tried it. And they tried it in Vietnam.
Yeah.
And I went through survival school, and one of the guys in the class was a 119 pilot. I said, I'm going to get killed. I can't fly those things. Are you kidding me? And they're going to put him in the front seat. And
Yeah.
who knows what happened, you know?
You know, when I resigned from the Air Force, and I had my paperwork in, and it was going up through the channels, and they couldn't talk me out of getting out. I ended up getting an airline to hand me an airline ticket, and I flew me to Langley, and a 2-star counseled me about my career possibilities and staying in the service, because I had a regular commission.
Oh, you would have, yeah, at that time, you'd been at
yeah.
least a full colonel.
That's what he said.
At least.
Yeah, that's what he said. When I, class 60C pilot training, when we showed up, now you know all the gymnastics you got to go through just to get into pilot training and what have you. So now here we are, I don't know, 300 or 400 guys showing up at San Antonio. The very first day, you know what the colonel says, who gets up and addresses us? The needs of the service have changed. We don't have flying slots for 1/3 of you. We have to wash out 1/3 of you. And he said the competition starts now, and they just ran us all back through a whole battery of physicals. And boy, it was cut and slash for those first few months in pilot training. If your performance today wasn't better than yesterday, you were up for an evaluation run. And you can imagine the amount of pressure that put on you.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was just slash, slash, slash. So when this 2-star, I think he was director of personnel, was counseling me, he was showing me charts of how, when we were hired, how they'd reduced the number of pilots they needed, so that 20 years later, there's going to be a shortage of rated pilots for command positions. And that was a sales pitch, you know. You're crazy, kid. You know, you don't know what you're doing. And I'm a pig-headed.
Yeah.
My mind had already been made up. And I have no regrets, even to this day, because my career was about as good as it could be.
Yeah, I had a 07, and by the next airplane after that would be?
Okay, 707s. My next airplane was a Convair 880 out of Chicago, which was a great airplane to fly. It was fast, easy to fly. It had a GE engine that had variable stators.
Ooh,
So-
nice. Throttle, yeah.
So you push the throttle up and you got power pretty
Yeah,
quick,
right,
as
yeah.
opposed to the old Pratt & Whitneys that took forever to
Yeah, right.
spool up. And then after that airplane, the company, I was still living in Kansas City, and the company asked me to come back and fly those Lockheed Jetstars.
Right.
I did that for a while, and then moved out here to San Diego, 1971. I've been here 47 years.
Oh, that's when we moved here too.
And decided to park my family in Poway, and I was willing to commute to anything. And so the family got to grow up and go to the same schools and have the same friends.
Yeah.
And I flew, well, in Kansas City, I finally upgraded to captain on DC-9s. So I flew captain on DC-9s, 727s, 707s, 767s, early airplane when you got it down slow and on final,
Really?
because it was so dirty. If you look at it,
Oh, yeah.
it's so dirty that the difference between 5 and 10 knots, you could fall out the bottom and go bang on a landing, and you'd be sitting there wondering, well, why? I did everything the same as I've done the last 6-10 times.
Yeah.
It was an okay airplane.
So when did you get the 747?
And flew that for quite a while. It's a comfortable airplane and it's easy to fly. The 747 was designed to be easy to fly, because when you see it landing, have you ever noticed the landing wheels?
Mm-hmm.
The trucks are just sitting up there and they go squeak,
Yeah.
squeak.
Yeah.
The biggest problem with the airplane is strong crosswind landing. Just stop and visualize
There's
this.
a lot of side, yeah.
You're not landing like this. You're landing, your nose. You may be up in the nose, and you're out over the side runway
Oh,
lights.
wow.
And the main gear is 100 foot behind you, and it's in the center of the runway. So you're not landing yourself, you're landing something that's
Oh,
100 feet
man.
behind. It's the same in Lockheed 1011. But the 747, that took a bit of an adjustment to figure out when you get down to the runway how you're going to get this crab out and get the nose over to the center without dropping a pod and clipping an engine out.
How'd you do it?
Very tactfully.
Rudder? Just rudder?
Whatever it takes.
But when you flew into places like lodges and places like that, you always had a lot of wind, right?
Yeah. One of the interesting auto landing systems was on the Lockheed 1011.
Right.
It was Category 3A. Category 3A is 100 meters RVR, about 300 feet.
Yeah, right.
To do a Category 3 landing, and I did about 4 of them in London over the years, the airport has to be certified Category 3, the airplane has to be certified, the pilot has to be certified for the airplane to go in and land. Now when you come in and land, you have 3 autopilots and they're all looking at each other. If one autopilot disagrees with any of the others, it gets kicked out, big red light, and you go around. So you have all 3 autopilots monitoring each other. The airplane comes in, you feel the wheels touch on, you do not see anything, because on the wide bodies, the big ones, the nose is still so far up in the air that you're up in the fog. So you feel the wheels touch, the autopilot lowers the nose to the runway, tracks right down the center, and at this time you can start seeing a few centerline lights right in front of your nose, and you just put it in reverse and come to a stop.
Wow.
And it does it smooth. Now here's the kicker. The pilot is not authorized to land the airplane. Only the autopilot.
Wow. And this is a 1970.
Hey, this is 30 years ago I was doing this.
Yeah.
25, 30 years ago. I'm retired 20 years. And I was doing it back in the early 1990s.
Well, they must have some good stuff now.
Today, yeah, it's got to be, well...
Probably GPS now.
They have drones landing and taking off all by themselves today.
Wow.
But it was a good system. And you might question how do you get enough faith to allow it to do it. I was going to St. Louis one day and it had a 23 knot direct crosswind. And I hooked the whole thing up. It was VFR. Hooked the whole autopilot system up. It went in, lowered the wing into the crosswind, put the airplane on, took out the crab, went squeak, squeak, and did a better job than I could have ever done. And it had a 23 knot crosswind. Now with 100 RVR, you know the wind's going to be almost 0.
Yeah, right.
So it's a piece of cake.
Yeah. Well, so skipping ahead to another subject, you had a little altercation on board a 747.
707.
707.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Back in the early 70s, late 60s, early 70s, hijackings were prevalent. I had one out of LAX. It was a red. That's what I love about these pilot groups that I belong to, and I run a couple of them.
Oh, that's what I wanted.
We never run out of stories.
Well, that's I wrote myself a note. Ask about the OBs. Tell me about these two things, and the Dedalians. Tell me about.
Okay, Dedalians is ex-military pilots, active and retired.
I thought the Dedalians was open to almost anybody.
No. Well,
what they said last week.
Here's what's happened. It originally designed for retired pilots.
Right.
Actually, and active pilots. You got to be a military pilot at some time.
Yeah.
And what's happening is it's dying out. They're not getting enough replacement people that have interest, so they've opened it up to backseaters, flight surgeons who dealt with a lot of pilots, and you can have guests whenever you want. So it's pretty loose now, but because they're trying to keep it alive.
When did it start?
You know, I don't know. It must have started way back, World War II probably. after the war.
The QBs are World War One. I know that.
QB's 1921.
Oh, so it was post the war.
I'm the governor of the hangar up in North County.
I went through a couple of years ago when Jeff Watkins was there, the English pilot who flew Lancasters.
Oh yeah.
And he helped flip over the Tirpitz.
Yeah, yeah.
But I keep asking because I was going to interview him, and he said, "Why don't you just come along to this thing?"
Do you know that Kurt Schultz was flying ME-109s up in northern?
Same time, yeah.
Yeah. Matter of fact, they launched him to go for the attack on the Tirpitz,
but too
and
late.
they got there too late. Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway,
No, they killed about 1,200 people. There were a lot of men that drowned in that thing.
yeah, I would imagine.
They just rolled it upside down. Is what they did.
Quiet Birdman is you got to be a pilot, minimum 500 hours pilot in command just to be accepted. World War One, after the war was over, a bunch of guys from flying over there in World War One, fighter pilots living in the New York area decided, hey, let's get together and have a little reunion. I hate to lose track of all you guys, so they got together at a bar restaurant.
I was going to say they have a Denny's there too.
No, they had
It's the same idea.
They met was at a place called Marty's.
It's the same idea though.
Yeah. So they had this big night of drinking and eating and what have you. And all of a sudden the news media heard about it. So they come in to cover it at one of their meetings. And one of the writers, newspaper people, nicknamed them Quiet Birdman because they were so noisy. You know how Tiny's always the big guy?
Yeah, sure.
So that's how they got the name Quiet Birdman. And as it expanded, it started in 1921. Just about every famous pilot that you could ever imagine has been a member of Quiet Birdman.
Yeah.
Today we have 214 hangars around the United States. And in San Diego County we have two. One is San Diego, it's called San Diego. Pretty much the lower half, and then the group that I'm with is the northern part of San Diego.
Yeah.
We call ourselves Palomar Hangar.
Yeah.
But they're all over the country. And we have a speaker every meeting. We have luncheons, and the other hangar has dinners. So a little bit different atmosphere, different group. Ours is a lot older because most guys have a job. The young guys got a job, so we're mostly retired people. And it's we average about 40, 45 guys every month. I run another group up here in Rancho Bernardo that's it's called it's going to sound weird. We started with 4 guys having coffee talking airplanes outside of a place called Sydney's Delicatessen. And we'd get there, it's like a food mart. We'd get there early in the morning, we'd get all the chairs, and we'd run about an hour and a half, tell stories, do everything. And everybody go into Sydney's to get a coffee and a bagel or something like that. So one day, when it got from 4, and it started growing, getting bigger, somebody said, we need a name. So, jokingly, and it was accepted, was Bagels and Bologna. You buy your bagels at Sydney's, and we provide the bologna out here.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so that's how we got our name. And I now run it, a number of things happened. We lost our place there because they remodeled. I run it every Friday morning in Remington Club in Rancho Bernardo, which is just alongside Vaughn's. It's a retirement community, retirement home. And I average 25 to 30 guys every Friday morning.
Oh, wow. That's a lot.
What we do is I sit around, I moderate it, and we just tell stories. And it's so much fun. I don't know from Friday to Friday whether one other guy will show up, but I'm getting 25 to 30.
Wow.
We probably have a total of maybe 50, and on average we get 25 to 30 show up. So I run it at that club, and it's humming along really nice.